My name is Daniel Harper. I'm 14 years old. I live in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and until a few months ago, I was just an ordinary kid. I played video games, went to school, loved basketball, and honestly, I never thought much about God. I thought I had all the time in the world. But on an ordinary summer afternoon, my life was over. Literally. Yes, I died. I was pronounced clinically dead for almost 7 minutes at Mercy Medical Center Hospital. And in the meantime, I saw things that completely changed everything I believed. Jesus appeared to me. He spoke to me. And what he showed me was so intense, so frightening, that I can no longer be silent. What I am going to tell you now is not easy to hear. But if you're watching this video, please stop whatever you're doing and pay attention. What Jesus revealed to me can save your life, or wake you up before it's too late. Leave a like, share this message, and write in the comments if you've ever felt that something spiritual is happening around you. Now take a deep breath. The journey will begin. Daniel Harper, 14 years old. 8th grade student. Light brown hair, glasses, and the dream of one day playing on the Jefferson High School basketball team. She lived with her parents, Michelle and Travis, and her younger sister, Ellie, 8 years old. Daniel grew up in an ordinary home, not very religious. His parents believed in God, but rarely went to church. Prayers before meals had been forgotten for years. And Daniel? He was like any boy of the new generation. I spent hours on TikTok, liked funny videos and shooting games. God, sky, hell, all this seemed far away, as if it were part of an old tale. Irrelevant. That day, everything seemed normal. Daniel was riding his bike with friends when suddenly, crossing a street, a car came up at high speed. The driver did not see it. The impact was violent. The metallic sound echoed through the neighborhood, and in a matter of seconds, Daniel was unconscious on the asphalt. Ambulances arrived quickly. Paramedics tried to revive him right there. But on the way to the hospital, his heart stopped. And at 5:42 p.m. at Mercy Medical Center, the heart monitor went silent. Daniel Harper was dead. The day of the accident. What led to clinical death? Saturday afternoon seemed perfect. Clear skies, mild temperatures, and a light wind cooling the streets of Cedar Rapids. Daniel and 2 friends had gone out on their bikes to enjoy the end of their vacation. They laughed loudly, ran between sidewalks, and planned to buy ice cream on the next block. But it was at the corner of 16th Avenue and 3rd Street that everything changed. The pedestrian light was green. They began to cross with tranquility. What Daniel didn't see, and no one could have predicted, was an SUV model car coming from the opposite direction at high speed. The driver had just received a message on his cell phone and took his eyes off the road for just a few seconds. Seconds that cost a boy his life. The impact was so strong that Daniel's body was thrown almost 5 meters away. The screams of friends and the sound of crumpled metal attracted neighbors. One of them, an off-duty nurse, rushed to help. Daniel was unconscious, with multiple fractures and clear signs of head trauma. Paramedics arrived in less than 5 minutes. The situation was critical. During the journey to the hospital, Daniel had 2 respiratory arrests. When she arrived, at the emergency room, her pulse was weak. The medical team tried to revive him for about 3 minutes, until at 5:42 p.m. the heart monitor drew a straight line. Silence. Doctors announced clinical death. Daniel's body was motionless, but your conscience. I was about to cross the line between this life and something far beyond what anyone here can imagine. The hospital room and the exact moment of cardiac arrest. What happened next was something that no doctor present on that shift could explain, with human words. As the emergency team at Mercy Medical Center raced against time trying to revive Daniel's body, something began to happen on the unseen plane. At the very moment that the heart monitor emitted that continuous sound, the unmistakable sign of death, Daniel says he felt as if he had shut off from the world, but not from consciousness. It was as if I had woken up from a strange dream, he reported. I heard my mom screaming in the hallway. I heard the doctors saying they had lost me, but I was above my body. Daniel saw everything from above. The cold room, the emergency lights, the tense faces of the nurses. He tried to scream, tried to call for help, but he had no voice, he had no body. And I didn't feel afraid. What I felt was peace. It was strange. I knew something serious had happened, but I felt no pain. Just a peace that can't be explained, as if all my problems had suddenly disappeared. At that moment, a light began to appear in the corner of the room. But it was no ordinary light. She seemed alive, vibrated, it pulsated. I called for him. Daniel felt irresistibly drawn, as if he were being gently guided to another place, and then he started to cross. Body. Separation. Floating above the bed, Daniel had never heard of out-of-body experience. He never studied spirituality. But what he experienced at that moment surpasses any logical explanation. He says that as soon as his heart stopped, there was no darkness, no terror. There was only total silence, as if the world had paused completely. And then came the separation. It was like taking off a tight coat. Suddenly, I was out. Lightweight, no pain, without fear, alone, conscience. He was above himself, floating on the ceiling of the emergency room, looking down. The body was there, pale, surrounded by doctors with masks and gloves. A nurse was crying discreetly in the corner, as if she knew it was too late. One of the doctors performed chest compressions, another injected medication. Time seemed frozen, and Daniel saw everything with supernatural clarity, as if his eyes had been replaced by something far more powerful. I saw through the walls. I could hear my parents outside, my mother screaming, "Say he's going to live! For God's sake!" This part of the experience left deep marks. The young boy realized for the first time the weight of human emotions seen from the outside, the pain of loss, the despair, the pure love of a mother who refused to accept the death of her son. But the most shocking part was yet to come. As it floated, something began to change around it. The hospital room seemed to dissolve gently, the ceiling disappeared, the walls were translucent. Everything started to vibrate at a different frequency, as if a new reality was about to open up before him. And that's when Daniel felt a presence. Presence so intense, so powerful, that his whole spirit trembled. It wasn't fear, it was reverence. I knew for sure that something sacred was there, and then the light appeared completely. Surrounding, hot, hooray. And in the center of it, someone was approaching. The crossing, tunnel of light, and the indescribable sensation. The light did not come like an explosion. It revealed itself gradually, like the sunrise in a place where darkness had lasted for centuries. It was a clarity, unlike anything Daniel had ever seen on Earth. It didn't hurt my eyes. On the contrary, it was as if each particle of that light healed something inside him. When she enveloped me, it felt like my heart had been touched by something eternal. I felt that there, nothing else could hurt me. Then he started moving. Not walking, nor flying like in dreams. It was as if he were being pulled gently, but firmly, through a tunnel made of pure light. The space around it seemed infinite, and yet intimate. Daniel describes the sensation as being carried in the arms of something invisible and infinitely loving. Inside, he heard sounds that didn't seem of this world. They were like songs, but there were no instruments. They looked like voices, but no known language. And yet, he understood. Every note, every vibration said, "You are loved, you belong, you were created to live." Time did not exist there. Minutes, hours, it was impossible to say. Everything seemed to happen within an eternal moment. And with each passing second, Daniel felt bits of fear, guilt, insecurity, everything the world had laid upon him, dissolving like smoke. He didn't want to go back. That was home, a home he had never known, but now everything inside him recognized. And then he showed up. At the entrance of an even more radiant dimension, Daniel saw someone approaching. The light seemed to come from him, but he did not hide within it, Rather, he walked toward it, tall, imposing, but completely enveloped by a compassion that made Daniel kneel inside, even without a body. The eyes. It was through the eyes that he spoke, eyes like real oceans, deep and clear, but with a fire that burned without destroying. Daniel knew even before he heard a word. It was Jesus. The encounter with Jesus. Appearance, voice, and presence. No image, painting, or film can fairly describe what Daniel saw at that moment. Jesus was not just a luminous figure or an ethereal presence. He was intensely real, more real than anyone Daniel had ever met on earth. He looked like a man, but at the same time, more. It was as if all eternity dwelt within him. Daniel remembers that Jesus wore a simple white tunic with golden details, but it was his face that marked him the most, not because of the shape, but because of the expression. There was a love there so absolute, so pure, that just looking at it, Daniel began to cry. He says he didn't know why he cried. She just cried, as if her soul was washing away all the guilt, all the fears, all the doubts. His eyes, I can't describe it. I saw my whole life reflected there, my mistakes, my thoughts, and yet he didn't judge me. He just looked at me as if to say, I know, and yet I love you. Jesus then stretched out his hand. Daniel felt as if he was being touched by a force that was both healing and burning. Not a physical pain, but an inner revelation. He knew at that moment that he was facing the truth, not an idea, not a religion, but the living truth itself. Jesus did not cry out. His voice was serene but powerful. Every word seemed to cut through every layer of existence. He said, Daniel, I know you, from your mother's womb, and I came to show what many need to know. Daniel didn't say anything. He only nodded, taken by a silent bow. There was no doubt, there were no questions, just a sense of mission. Jesus then walked beside him, and as they walked through that landscape made of light and glory, Daniel knew he was about to see things that would forever change his life, and maybe his own, too. The first revelation. Many who say they follow me do not know me. As they walked through that heavenly dimension, Daniel realized that Jesus was serious. Not sad, but deeply attentive. There was a weight in the air, as if something urgent was about to be revealed. They stopped in front of something that looked like a window, but was made of light. As Daniel looked, he saw scenes of the earth. Churches, crowds in worship, religious leaders preaching fervently, people with Bibles in their hands. And then Jesus spoke. His words were soft, but they cut like blades. They say they follow me, but they don't know me. Daniel felt a pinch in his heart. Jesus continued, They speak in my name, they build temples, they lead crowds, but their hearts are far away. They love status, influence, power, but they have forgotten the essential, repentance, holiness, self-sacrificing love. Daniel then saw more images, shepherds screaming, but with blank stares. Believers who sang songs of worship while inside. They hated their own brothers. Churches full, but with cold hearts. I do not reject them because they have sinned, said Jesus, looking into Daniel's eyes, but because they have ceased to love the truth. They prefer the appearance of faith to true transformation. Daniel felt ashamed. He himself thought of how many times he mocked people who spoke of Jesus. How many times have you ignored God's presence because you think it was old people's things? And now, before the source of life itself, he saw himself small, exposed, and beloved. I want you to say this, Daniel, Jesus said. Tell him I'm not looking for perfection. I'm looking for true children, surrendered hearts, people willing to really know me and not just repeat what they heard. At that moment, Daniel began to understand. The message he brought from the other side was not just a warning, it was a call for a return to the true gospel. A cry of Jesus asking, Know me, really. Visions of hell, the suffering of those who rejected the truth. After the first reveal, the surrounding environment changed drastically. The light that once enveloped everything began to recede. The atmosphere became dense, the heat intensified. And Daniel, who until then had experienced a heavenly peace, now felt something completely opposite. A weight, a suffocating anguish, that came not from the body, but from the soul. Jesus looked at him with compassion and said, "Now you will see what many deny, but it's real." Suddenly, what looked like an opening revealed itself in space. It was not a symbolic vision, it was real. Daniel felt as if he was being carried to the edge of an abyss. And what he saw there, he never forgot it. Hell wasn't like in cartoons or movies, he says. There was no demon with a trident. It was much, much worse. He saw people, many, thousands, and what shocked him the most, each one suffered differently. Some screamed in physical pain, others cried in deep regret, and some, they just stared into the void with absolute despair. They knew, they rejected the truth. Daniel described a man in a suit who in life had been an influential preacher. His mouth was sewn by spiritual chains. He tried to speak, but he couldn't. Jesus, in a firm voice, explained he knew the truth, but he preferred prestige. He exchanged my voice for the approval of men. Another young man was imprisoned in a cell of darkness. He screamed for his mother, cried out for help, but no one answered. Next to it, images of moments when he mocked everything related to God were repeated in cycles. They are not here for faults, Jesus said. They are here because they reject my love, for mocking the only truth that could save them. Daniel cried, unable to contain the impact. She felt a pain that was not hers, but seemed to come from the heart of Jesus. As if every soul there were a child he lost, not through lack of love, but by their own choice. And then Jesus looked firmly into Daniel's eyes and said, "Talk about it. They need to know. Hell is real, and it was not created for man, but many choose it every day." The tears of Jesus. The pain of the separation from humanity. After that devastating vision, Daniel could barely stand up, even though he had no physical body there. It was as if every scream he had heard in hell had been trapped inside him. The pain she experienced was not only emotional, it was spiritual, profound, cutting. And it was at that moment that he looked at Jesus and saw something that marked him forever. Jesus was weeping. It wasn't a dramatic, noisy cry. It was a silent cry, but loaded with a pain impossible to describe. Real tears, sacred. They fell like liquid diamonds, and when they touched the ground, of that spiritual environment, the very air seemed to tremble. Why would he cry, thought Daniel. He is the king of the universe. He has already conquered death. Why this sadness? And then, without needing to ask, Jesus answered, "I cry for them, for each one who chose to move away from me, for every soul I have created with love." And that was lost. Daniel saw, as if a screen were opening in the sky, scenes of the earth, passing before them. Thousands of people, men, women, young people, children. Each face, a story. And alongside many, there were angels trying to speak. Signs, moments when God tried to reach the heart. But in so many cases, people simply ignored it. They come to me when they feel pain, but they forget me when everything is going well. They look for solutions, but not relationship. They want heaven, but they don't want my presence. Jesus squinted his eyes, as if struggling to hold back more tears. Daniel saw that the Savior of the world carried an invisible burden, but immensely heavy, that of human indifference. They trade my love for distractions, my sacrifice, for fleeting pleasures. I died for them, Daniel, but many live as if it means nothing. These words hurt Daniel more than any previous vision. He understood there, something he had never realized. It is not only sin that wounds the heart of God, it is contempt. Jesus did not weep out of hatred or anger. He cried like a father who loves deeply and sees his children walking straight into an abyss without hearing his cries of warning. Daniel, still overcome by a mixture of pain and compassion, whispered, "What does the Lord want me to do?" And then Jesus answered, "Show them. Show that there is still time." But time is running out. The vision of the future. Godless schools and moral collapse, the scene changed again. The gloomy environment was replaced by a wide space, almost like a field. But the sky above was grey, heavy, as if something terrible was about to happen. Jesus looked at Daniel and, with a subtle nod, opened before him a new vision. It was the future. Daniel found himself observing a school. It was not just any school. It looked like a modern institution with state-of-the-art technology, well-dressed. Children, young teachers. But something was deeply wrong. "Observe," said Jesus. Daniel realized that there was no cross, no mention of God, no Bible, no prayer. Students were being taught that morals were relative, that everything was acceptable, as long as it made one happy. The teachers repeated phrases such as, "There is no absolute truth. You are your own guide. Right and wrong are social constructs." Jesus then spoke, "They removed my name from the books, after minds, and now from hearts." In the vision, Daniel saw a generation growing up without direction. Disoriented children, young people given over to emotional and existential addictions, broken families. Many teenagers looked around and silently asked, "Why am I so empty?" Jesus pointed to a classroom where a girl was being corrected for saying she believed in God. They laughed at her. They isolated her. The teacher asked her to leave the room. The light inside that child went out, little by little, under the weight of shame. The system will be shaped to erase all mention of my presence. They will say that it is for freedom, but it will be control. Daniel also saw parents too busy with work and social media, handing their children over to screens and algorithms. I saw a mother saying, "They're quiet in the room, so it's okay." But inside the room, the boy was about to take his own life, overwhelmed by inner voices that said, "You're not enough." Jesus looked at Daniel gravely. If they remove the light, all that remains is darkness. The collapse will not only be moral, it will be spiritual. An entire generation will be wounded by what should protect them. And with a firmer tone, Jesus concluded, "They want a world without God, but they can't imagine the kind of world it will create." Daniel was paralyzed. The pain, the silence, the spiritual emptiness. It was like seeing a bomb about to explode, and no one noticing. Jesus then turned to him and said, "Someone needs to scream. Someone needs to wake them up." Spiritual warfare. In homes, families divided by faith, the visions did not cease, each one more intense, more revealing than the last. Now, Daniel saw himself inside ordinary homes, ordinary American homes, like his, but there was something wrong, very wrong. The environment seemed normal on the outside, sofas, televisions, family photos. But on the spiritual plane, Jesus showed what the natural eyes did not see. There were invisible cracks in the walls, darkness hidden in seemingly harmless corners. And then he spoke. It is inside the houses that the most brutal war is happening. Daniel saw parents and children yelling at each other. She saw mothers praying alone while their husbands mocked. He saw teenagers steeped in pornography, violent games, obscure influences, while dusty Bibles sat forgotten on shelves. But the most impactful thing was to see families divided because of faith. In one of the visions, Jesus showed a father who had given his life to Christ, but his wife said that he was fanatical. His children moved away from him. In the same house, prayers and spiritual attacks coexisted. The atmosphere was tense. The spiritual division was real. "The truth will separate," said Jesus. "Not everyone will accept it. Many will fight against their own family members because of my name. And this division will be painful." Daniel also saw spirit demons, dark forms that infiltrated homes through TV shows, music, videos, seemingly innocent discussions. They fed on fear, anger, pride, and when the word of God was spoken, they writhed and disappeared. Jesus revealed, spiritual warfare does not begin in the streets. It starts in the living room, in the bedroom, in the silence of the heart. Daniel then saw a family in prayer, even in the midst of persecution within their own home. There was light all around them. Angels took a stand. And he understood, homes that resist spiritually will be strongholds in times of darkness, but many will be destroyed from within. because they did not discern the battle. Jesus put his hand on Daniel's shoulder and said, "Tell them that. The biggest battle of the last few days, it starts at home. Youth in danger, distractions, addictions, and perdition. Daniel, still taken by the previous revelations, was led by Jesus to a new vision, and this touched him in an especially profound way because he himself was part of that group. The youth. The E. Setting was now a large city, but what he saw was not what the physical eye would show. He saw what was happening in the spiritual realm behind the routines of the young people. On every corner, in every school, in every dark room with the cell phone light on, there was a war fought in silence. Look, Jesus said, they're being distracted until death. Daniel saw crowds of young people sleepwalking, everyone with headphones in their ears, cell phones in their hands, eyes fixed on screens. But their spiritual faces were empty, as if the soul had been erased. They consumed videos non-stop, memes, songs, laughed, but inside, many screamed. And no one listened. Jesus revealed, the enemy does not need swords. All it takes is an infinite scroll. He also saw spirits of confusion, loneliness, and immorality, walking among the youth, whispering lies. You are not loved. Nothing matters. No one will understand you. Use it only today. Tomorrow you stop. And the young people believed. Daniel cried when he saw 11, 12-year-old children cutting themselves, taking drugs, indulging in destructive practices, while his parents thought it was just a phase. He then saw a young woman, beautiful, influential on social media, who smiled in the videos but inside cried out for meaning. And at dawn, when she went to bed, she said in thought, God, if the Lord exists, give me a sign. Jesus looked at Daniel and said, they are hungry, but they are being fed poison. Daniel, still in shock, asked, but how to save them? Jesus responded, with authority and tenderness, with light, with truth, with courage. A single young man on fire for me, it can ignite an entire generation. And at that moment, Daniel saw young people being awakened, some quitting addictions, others destroying obscure content, and many kneeling in their rooms, crying, praying. No cameras, no likes, just sincerity. Jesus smiled. There is still hope, but it is urgent. Distractions are killing. It's time to wake up. The chance to return. There is still time, but not too much. After showing the deep darkness that threatened the youth, Jesus took Daniel to a different place, a vast open field where the wind blew softly. The sky seemed divided. On one side, the golden glow of a pure and restorative light. On the other, black, heavy clouds advancing silently. In the center of that field, a giant hourglass floated, with grains of sand slowly falling. Jesus looked at Daniel with a solemn look and said, there is still time, but not too much. Daniel felt the weight of these words like thunder in his soul. He understood, without explanation, that the world was at a tipping point, a spiritual crossroads where eternal decisions were being made every day. Then Jesus showed faces, thousands of them, ordinary people, taxi drivers, doctors, athletes, housewives, students, politicians. Some were awakening, feeling in their hearts that something was wrong with the world. Others resisted, steeped in pride, mockery, and spiritual coldness. And Jesus said, I have spoken. In dreams, in messages, in encounters that seem like coincidence. I'm calling, but many still cover their ears. Daniel also saw great spiritual awakenings, people praying in the streets, young people evangelizing in schools, spontaneous services taking place in parks, universities, even in prisons. It was as if a last wave of mercy was being released upon the earth, a last invitation before the door was finally closed. But he also saw other signs. Leaders hardening their hearts, churches exchanging the truth for pleasant messages. The fear of persecution silencing prophets, and many settling down, saying, there is still time, one day I'll change. Jesus then pointed to the hourglass. The time of grace is still running, but it won't last forever. Daniel felt a holy despair. I wanted to scream. I wanted to go back to earth at that moment, just to say to everyone, wake up, run to the cross, cry out while you can still find it. Jesus looked at him with love and authority. That's why I'm showing you this, Daniel. You'll be back. And he will say, there is still time, but not too much. The awakening. The moment when it comes back to life, the last image before the return was the most impactful. Daniel saw his own body, pale, motionless, surrounded by doctors who were already beginning to slow down resuscitation efforts. The sound of the heart monitor remained unchanged, a straight line, no beating. Jesus then approached him one last time, touched his forehead and said, "You'll come back, but it will never be the same again." Daniel wanted to stay. Everything inside him cried out to continue in that perfect presence, in that absolute love. But something stronger pulled him back. As if an invisible mission had been imprinted within him. He could no longer run away, nor to be silent. And it was then that the impossible happened. Inside the emergency room at Mercy Medical Center, the heart monitor beeped. A knock, then another, and yet another. The doctors, already resigned, looked at each other in shock. One of them shouted, "We have a pulse!" Daniel's body trembled, his eyes opened, slow, heavy. And all around, the faces once gripped by frustration now, shone with amazement and relief. He tried to speak, but his lips just moved. A nurse approached, holding his hand, and said, "You're alive, Daniel, it's back." But in his heart, Daniel knew he would never be just an ordinary boy again. As he recovered in the following days, the visions, the words of Jesus, the revelations, they were all vivid, intact, as if they had been engraved with fire inside. His soul, and the first sentence he managed to form, looking at his parents crying next to him, was, "Jesus spoke to me, and he's coming back." The mission. Why he returned and what Jesus told him to say, Daniel knew. From the moment he came back to life, he did not come back by chance. Those 7 minutes he was dead were not a medical failure. They were a calling. While still in the hospital, his mind was invaded by the words of Jesus, not as a distant memory, but as a constant echo. "You're going to tell them." The doctors called it a miracle. The family knelt down, thanking them through tears. But Daniel looked at everyone with a seriousness unusual for a 14-year-old. There was a fire in his eyes, a weight in his voice. Something has changed, and everyone could feel it. Days later, Daniel made his first video on his cell phone, still with a weak voice and a tired look. He said, "I died, and Jesus spoke to me. He showed me hell, heaven, the future, and sent me word to you." It's no joke. It is not religion. It's real, and time is running out. This video went viral. Thousands watched, thousands commented, some scoffed, but many knelt down and returned to the foot of the cross. Cold people warmed up, skeptical people opened up, because that boy's words were not just words. They were an arrow from the sky carving hearts, and what Jesus told him to say was simple and non-negotiable. Heaven is real. Hell too. The truth can no longer be ignored. Youth need to wake up. The time of grace is running out. Christ is at the door. Daniel returned with a mission to burn inside, to prepare hearts, calling the lukewarm, the cold, the religious, the forgotten, the rebellious, everyone. Because Jesus wept, and as long as there is a second of time, his voice still echoes, "Come back to me." You've heard the story. It was not an invention. It was not a hallucination. It was a real meeting lived by an ordinary boy, chosen for an unusual mission. You can ignore it. You can disbelieve it. But he will not be able to say that he was not warned. Jesus is calling. Now. Not tomorrow. Not when life calms down. Now. If this message touched your heart, share it so that more people will be blessed. Write in the comments, "Jesus, I come back to you." And don't forget, subscribe to the channel. Every week you'll hear stories the world tries to hide, but that heaven insists on revealing. The harvest is coming. Time is running out. Get ready. Jesus is coming back.